What are some common mistakes that you see, Tim?
The most common thing that I see with investors is they just buy in their backyard. They want to be able to drive past the house and wave to it, knowing damn well it'll never wave back.
With over 14 years experience in the Australian property market, Tim Graham, the General Manager at Hotspotting, has helped thousands of investors cut through the noise, understand the data, and build real wealth through property investing.
You need to build a team before you build your portfolio. Where we're different is we don't just look at the real estate data in isolation. We combine it with economic data, population trends, infrastructure projects. The exact same property, if I had to pick that up from Albury and dropped it over the border 2 minutes, my stamp duty would have gone from $25,000 up to $35,000. So these are all the considerations that you miss when you just look in.
Tim, welcome to the House Story.
Thanks for having me.
Why don't you kick off? Who are you? And Tim, what are you known for?
Well, that's a good question. So Tim Graham, General Manager at Hotspotting at the moment. Probably known in the property space in terms of I've been a buyer's agent for about 14 years now. In my last couple of years of joining the team at Hotspotting, we're more on the data and analytics side of things. And then outside of that, father of two, love my sport, country boy at heart. That's me.
Where'd you grow up? Tell me about little Tim.
Yeah, so I'm still little Tim.
Okay.
I grew up in a small country town in country Victoria called Yea. It's a population of about 1,100 people.
Yeah, right. Really small.
Really small, yeah. So, funnily enough, it was we moved there when I was about 18 months old, so 1985, and the sign as you drive into town says population 1,100. And I left there in 2011, I think, and it was still saying the same. So we could anything we could draw from that conclusion every time there was a child born, someone who had to leave. Yeah. But very small country town, great upbringing in good schools and everything like that. I went through primary school all through Yea, and then I won best and fairest in the under-17s for the football club locally 1 year, and that sort of gave me a bit of an opportunity to go to a private school in Assumption College in Kilmore on a football scholarship. I loved my footy. I went there and I was meant to be there on this football scholarship, and I think I played about 4 or 5 games, and then I broke my collarbone, left-hand collarbone.
Geez. Yeah. Had
about 7 weeks off. 7 weeks off. First game back, broke my right hand collarbone. So not much football was played after that. So and then after schooling, never really had any interest in university and things like that. Basically my parents, when they moved up to Yea, the reason they moved up to Yea in the first place, they bought a hotel and they were heading up to Mount Buller all the time on weekends and things like that. And they thought, wouldn't it be a great idea to buy a business halfway and we could shoot up to the mountain in the winter whenever we choose. And anyway, so they bought the pub, and I don't think they've been to the snowfield since.
Yeah. Okay.
But I had really enjoyed my time growing up as a kid in that hotel. So straight after school, all I wanted to do was go back to that pub. So I finished up my schooling and I went back and I started managing that for the new owners at the time. My parents had already moved on from that point, but then I had 12 years in hospitality.
Yeah, that's amazing. And they still own the pub?
No, so we actually sold it. My parents didn't operate the pub for that long. I think maybe only 4 or 5 years. They owned the actual building for a bit longer than that, but they actually didn't keep it all that long. When my brother came along, second child, and they said, look, we probably need to get out of the pubs.
Why property, Tim?
That's a really good question because it's funny, I think it's a bit of a cliche term, but Steve Jobs said, it's really hard to, join the dots when you look forward in life, but when you look backwards, a lot of those dots are easy to connect. And when I look back now, how did I end up in hospitality? I'd had pubs and cafes for 12 years and I, never had weekends. And after that, you're pretty burnt out. You got the moon tan instead of the sun tan, never see any daylight. And I just wanted to do something different. So this is back before Seek. On the weekend, I picked open the Herald Sun. I looked through the classifieds, and there was a job that said in-home consultant for a property investment firm. And I thought, that sounds interesting. So I called up, and they do this thing called a piggyback, where you go out and watch somebody else actually present in the home to customers that have made an inquiry about their services. And by this stage, I think I owned a piece of real estate at that point. It was just a block of land in Yea, but I never really knew anything about finance, knew nothing about property at all. I knew I had an interest in property, but that was about it. But I went along and I watched this consultant, present. He was talking about, Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and all these different things about creating your wealth and how you could use tax dollars to help create wealth for your retirement and things like that. And I was like, this is unbelievable. So I had, after watching that, I said, yes, I'm definitely interested. I went down to meet the CEO in the head office. And I'm one of these people that's always on time. I'll be there early every time. So I get there early. I go into 499 St Kilda Road, I get a coffee. And then I go to start walking down the foyer to get to the elevator. Anyway, and I hop in the elevator. I can hear these footsteps coming along. So I just put my hand open and held the lift. And this guy hops in and he goes, "Oh, thanks for that." He said, I said, "What level are you going to?" He said, 15. I said, "Oh, me too." He goes, "Oh, what are you doing here?" I said, "I'm here for a job interview." He goes, "Which company?" I said, "Reventon." He said, "I think you'll get the job." It was the owner, Chris, who you've obviously had on this podcast before.
Yeah.
And anyway, so we hit it off. We had a really good chat that day, and I ended up getting a role there, and very quickly realised that my role at the time was to actually send people into the office to meet with the smart people, the ones who knew about finance and property. And I really quickly went, well, I don't want to do that role for too long. I want to be one of those people. So I set about to get my mortgage broking diploma. And then after that, it was a great business because it actually had accounting, financial planning, property management, everything all in under one roof.
Yeah.
So you got to see all aspects of the financial industry, and I really liked real estate. So after doing my mortgage broking diploma, I got a really good foundation in how the numbers worked and everything. But I really wanted to get into the real estate where there was a bit less paperwork. So naturally went and get my real estate licenses, and then the rest is history. Been property since.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Where I'm sure you generally get to speak to a lot of different people, and I often hear people just confused around where to invest, where to even start with it. What are some common mistakes that you see, Tim?
I mean, the most common one, and it's probably worth noting, whilst I did real estate, I've never worked on the vendor side. It's always been on the investor side, on the buyer side more specifically. So I never really helped with home ownership. It's always been more on the investment side. And the most common thing that I see with investors that are just starting out is they just buy in their backyard. They say, I go to the Commonwealth Bank because I'm a Dolomite. I've always been banking with them, so I go back to them and say, hey Commonwealth Bank, how much can I borrow for an investment property? They tell you it's 800,000-900,000. So you go out and buy a property that's just lower than your total budget because no one wants to go all the way to the top. And then they buy something local to them. And of course, when you do that, you're confined to whatever that market is going to do, and you've done very little research other than what the property looks like, and I suppose whether it's a good street, what school zone, etc. But you don't really have an opportunity to sort of look broader. And that's probably the most common mistake because a lot of the reason that people do that is they want to be able to drive past the house and wave to it, knowing damn well it'll never wave back. They want to go there and maybe do some maintenance and things like that, which that's what you've got property managers and you've got trades for. So that's the most common one. And if you were to say, why is it a problem? Yeah. Well, the problem is that if you're just looking locally, you're not seeing everything else that's outside of that. And if I'm a Victorian, if I was to look, actually I'll tell you specifically, not the last investment property I bought, but the one before that, I intentionally bought it in Albury instead of Wodonga. That's Albury Wodonga's on the New South Wales Victorian border. Yep. The exact same property, if I had to pick that up from Albury and dropped it over the border 2 minutes in Wodonga, my stamp duty would have gone from 25,000 up to 35,000. Yeah, the land tax that I pay in Victoria actually starts at $50,000, which is essentially every block, right? Yep. Every piece of land in Victoria will be over that. So I instantly start paying land tax. And then if I go back to Wodonga, it doesn't kick in until $1 million. So these are all the considerations that you miss when you just look in your own backyard. So that's probably the most common.
Why do you think Aussies love property so much?
Look, I suppose it's performed really well, so it's pretty easy, but we love something we can kick. I don't think, this is probably a blanket statement. It doesn't apply to everybody, but I don't think Aussies trust shares as much. And as much as a lot of people may argue that, Australian real estate isn't affordable. I've been lucky enough to travel the world doing real estate, and I can tell you when I'm speaking to people, my age or younger in, cities like New York and London and any of these major capital cities, they don't even think about buying real estate because it's just so out of reach. So they're more inclined to actually invest in shares. But here in Australia, as much as we have that constant rhetoric that it's very unaffordable and it's impossible to get in the market, you don't have to buy in the capital city, do you? You could buy and invest, and we've got great tax incentives in this country to allow you to become a rent investor and things. So I think that's why Australians really love real estate. And look at the way that it's performed over the last 5 years. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. Do you feel like you're getting more young individuals now, like first home buyers, that are reaching out to you guys to get more information or to better understand how to make this decision? Or do you feel like it's been the same the past few years?
No, I mean, there's just so much more information out there now. If you go back to when I started 10 years ago, there wasn't, I mean, there's probably some blogs and things like that on the internet, but certainly not property courses. There wasn't anywhere near the amount of content that you see on YouTube and podcasts and everything. I think we've gone from having a really difficult time to find the right information because it didn't exist, to now there's just too much information. But in answer to your question, the audience is definitely getting younger. I think there's a bit of a shift in that younger mentality that they don't want to, do it like their parents. They want to be able to start earlier, and they're a bit more aspirational as well. So it's good to see.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Look, I mean, maybe even social media. They want to keep up with the Joneses. They want to be, they want to be affluent. They want to be successful. And I think one of the things that we do as Australians is we show our wealth in different ways, whether it's the car, the watch, but definitely real estate. So I think for a lot of people, it's about having real estate as a bit of a status symbol as well.
For those that maybe don't have access to certain knowledge or certain individuals, where would you be pointing them to go, Tim? Like what's easy, low-hanging fruit where they can just go and learn basic stuff that'll help them?
It's a good question. I would say, I'd say go and invest in finance and in real estate knowledge. The way to do that would be the basics. So you can literally get property for dummies, finance for dummies, understand mortgages, understand how money works. There's great books like The Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is an obvious one to start with. Richest Man in Babylon's another great one. Napoleon Hill's book escapes me now. What was he? No, escapes me. But there's a couple of those books that have been around for a long time, which are really good foundational books that you can read to understand why. And if you look at the Rich Dad Poor Dad mentality, Dad, his real father telling him, go and do well at school. If you do well at school, you'll get a good job. You get a good job, you'll stay in that for the next 60 years and pay off a mortgage. And that's not the great Australian dream in my eyes. No. But then there's the other way, which is to actually learn about money and how do you make money. And I think that's what the foundational steps that you need to make before you start investing at all.
How do you make money?
How do you make money?
With property.
So, well, property, the biggest powerful power in property is leverage, right? So I can go and borrow money for that much, and then it can hold an asset that's worth that much. And if that grows, I can then go and borrow money from that to go again. And the beauty is, if you think about it, if I gave you a $100,000 pay rise, you're going to lose half of that to tax. If I go and give you a $100,000 equity gain, you can use that equity to go again tax-free. And that's power.
Can you just explain the leverage as well?
So leverage is leverage is the ability to use an asset to borrow money against it, and you'll be able to. So as an example, we talk about it in real estate terms. I buy a property for $500,000. If it gets up to $800,000, there's $300,000 equity gain. But if I say I wanted to stay under 80% and not pay lender's mortgage insurance, I can say $800,000 times 80%, and then minus my debt gives me usable equity. That usable equity is essentially a deposit to go into your next property. And as I mentioned before, it's actually tax-free to do it that way. Whereas if you were to make a gain, you pay a capital gain, or if you were to get a pay rise, you'll start paying tax on that. Equity's tax-free to go and use as another deposit to go again. So for nearly all I've only ever paid a cash deposit for my first property, and every one after that has always been an equity gain.
Most people are going to find that quite complex, that maybe don't understand property or finance in depth. You've touched on them going and reading just a couple of basic books to wind up. Are there any tips that you'd give to young individuals to help them maybe better understand this space?
Yeah. One of the things we often say at Hotspotting is you need to build a team before you build your portfolio, right? And the thing is, you don't have to do all these things yourself. People often think, I don't want to pay for advice, or I don't want to go and use a financial planner or a mortgage broker or whatever it may be, because, partly maybe it's a trust thing, but the other part is they think it's expensive. And Australians, for some reason, have notoriously not liked paying for advice. Like we just try to do everything ourselves, or we ask our friends or our uncle at the barbecue, and that type of advice is the one that usually gets you in trouble. My recommendation is that's a false economy. If you're not prepared to go and pay for good advice and build a good team around you, how the hell are you going to do well? So you look at some of the best entrepreneurs and business owners in the world, they say that they try to be the dumbest person in the room. Hire people that know their job intently, and then get them to do what you don't know. So I would say, for starters, go and interview a couple of mortgage brokers. Understand what's possible with your finances, know your numbers, and then in any realm, whether it's accountant, financial planner, etc., interview many of them, and one of them's going to resonate with you. And that's where I'd start. I'd start by learning as much as you possibly can. And I think everybody at the moment's got this bit of a FOMO, and you feel like you've got to do something. And whilst action is the best thing you can actually do to get ahead, it can also work against you if you get it wrong. So we want to make sure that the people that you're getting that advice off, I'd be seeing, how long you've been doing this, what do you invest in? I mean, at the moment, one of the biggest challenges I see in our real estate market right now in the investment side is that there's just a new buyer's agent born every day. And they're running around the country giving people advice on where to buy and what to buy, and probably don't own real estate themselves. I mean, the only way I think they're winning business on this is probably by doing discounts on their fees and things like that. But I mean, again, that's a false economy as well. Why would you want to go with the cheapest person who doesn't have the track record, doesn't have any investments themselves? I want to know the person who's going to be advising me on how to spend my money. I want to know how well they're doing too.
I think that's so underrated. I think the importance of having good advisors and good support around you. I couldn't agree with you more. I think Australians don't lean into that enough. And there's such a wealth of knowledge. I mean, Terry's obviously one of them. What is hotspotting for those that don't know?
So our business Hotspotting is essentially we're known as Australia's #1 independent real estate analysts. So what that means is we look at real estate data as an analyst, and we provide insights. Where we're a little bit different to a lot of other analysts is that most real estate analysts look at real estate data in isolation, meaning on its own, and always with a rearview mirror. So they're going, this is what's happened. And the problem with that is, the past doesn't necessarily predict the future.
No.
And in fact, if you actually went on the past and said, well, listen, I'd never invest in a place that hasn't performed well, or I'd only invest in places that have done well, you're going to mistime the cycle. So it's actually really silly to go that way. Where we're different is we don't just look at the real estate data in isolation. We combine it with economic data, population trends, infrastructure projects, and then we create forward-looking insights. So in a summary of what we do, we basically turn those insights out, and we put them in the form of reports and through our members portal to educate both property investors or consumers and also the real estate market in the way of real estate professionals and buyers agents.
What would I find in a report?
So we cover about 120 different locations around Australia. In every one of those locations, you will see the key highlights for the area, what's driving that local economy, because we believe real estate markets are very local in nature. They come out of local economies. You're not going to find a booming property market in a really bad economy. It's just not possible. So we look at really strong local economies and say, this is what's driving it. The next thing we do is we talk about what is made up in that local economy. So what's driving? Is it the health sector? Is it education? Is it public sector? What are the major projects coming to town? And where's the real estate market at in terms of its cycle right now? Because all real estate markets are cyclical. So is this at the bottom of the market? Is it nearing the top? Is it a plateau? Is it a second wind market? And we give you analysis on where in the market it is right now, and then also what the future prospects look like. So do we believe that this is a market that's going to outperform the nation over the next 12 months, 5 years, 10 years? So in addition to those 120 locations, we also compile those reports into what we would call a national top 10 or a city-based top 5, for instance, to say, right now, if you were going to enter the market, these are the locations we believe that are going to give you long-term growth, but also, if you're timing the market well, you're going to get the quickest uplift. So we release a report at the start of every year called our National Top 10 Best Buys Report. At the end of that year, we always compare our analysis to the national market. And even though we're taking a long-term approach, we'd never put anything in there we think is only going to be short-term. Even though we're taking a long-term approach, as an example, last year from our selection of the 10 local government areas we believe to have the best opportunities for long-term growth, we compared the 12-month growth against the national market, which was 5 or 6%, and our worst performer was 11%.
Okay.
From 9 through 1, we were between 15% and 29% capital growth. So the beauty of that is that whilst we buy real estate for that long term, if you can get that type of growth in the first year or two, it can get you back in the market much faster.
Yeah, that's good. Just explain why, because maybe not everyone will understand.
So there's when you're thinking about buying real estate and more in the way of the investment, there's probably 2-3 things that you're really looking for. One is I want capital growth, which is the difference between what you buy it for and then what it's worth in the future. The next one is the cash flow, which is often referred to as rental yield, which is a percentage of what you paid for it versus what it's getting in terms of the cash flow and rent. And then the other part is also, is there an opportunity here to manufacture growth? And the way that we could do that is through renovations, subdivisions, all sorts of things, knockdown rebuilds, whatever it may be.
Yeah, interesting. What are the top 10?
Right.
Or what were the top 10 for the year starting?
Well, for the last year, you're going to test me now.
Give me.
We were definitely in the West Australian markets the year before that. By the start of last year, there was probably still some Western Australia in 2024, actually. But then certainly some areas throughout Brisbane. We've also... it's probably easy to talk about where we're at today. Right. So if we go to the end of 2024, this proves how cyclical markets are. Perth grew by 15% in 2024. At the same time, in the same 12-month period, Melbourne went backwards by -3%. Fast forward to the end of the financial year that has just gone, and that 12-month growth, which is measured every single month, you can sort of see that coming backwards in Perth now, and we're sitting at about 7.9%, meaning that Perth has reached a peak in the market where it's no longer affordable. It doesn't mean the prices will drop, but they certainly can't continue at the same rate that they were. Melbourne's now in the positive about 2%, and 9 months ago we said we believe that Darwin will be the best performer. Darwin, yeah.
Because Darwin's been quite flat for the last...
Been very flat. And we often get a lot of pushback when we come into, we do obviously a lot of media as well, and we come out and say we believe that Darwin's going to be one of the best performing locations in the country. And of course people go, it's never worked. Why would that work? And we say, well, do you want to buy before or after the growth? So we're telling you, because we've got a lot of proprietary formulas that sort of help with that predictive methodology. And, partly it's rising sales activity, partly it's the amount of government infrastructure going to the areas, vacancy rates, days on market reducing, all sorts of things like that we measure, and we can start to see markets changing. And the only thing in real estate that is inevitable is markets will change. Not every market can stay rising forever. They will get to a point where they reach affordability, they'll start to plateau, and then they can go again. It's Darwin's turn.
I believe they're about to allow first home buyers to go down to 2.5%.
Well, there's some I think so. The new one, which has just been brought forward to the 1st of October, is the 5% scheme, which basically allows you to get in with a 5% deposit, which you could already do. But this way you can do it without having to pay any lender's mortgage insurance. Where it can go down as low as 2% is for some single parents that might be entitled to get the lower or the higher LVR and lower deposit.
What do you think that's going to do to the property market?
Look, it's going to put pressure on because each state has different caps. It's going to put some more pressure into that price point, and there'll definitely be a bit of FOMO as this happens. But in terms of the overall, what's it going to do to markets? First home buyers typically account for about 30% of the market at any time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and it's like when we see, any talk about changes to negative gearing, capital gains tax and everything like that, whenever they're talking about investors, they often think that it's investors that own 25, 30 properties that are, inflating property prices. It's just not the case. 72% of property investors in Australia own one property. You have to have more than 5 or 6 properties to be in the top 1% of Australian property investors. So again, a lot of that media headline that talks about investors inflating the market and things, the stats don't show that. And I think for first home buyers with this new deposit scheme, it's going to have effect with some properties in that up to those caps, but I can't see it being, it's not going to change real estate overnight.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Tim, I always hear differing opinions, apartments versus houses versus townhouses.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
There's another interesting one and a very unpopular one for us in terms of what we're seeing, because we're independent, no one tells us what we can and cannot say.
Yep.
So we call it as we see it, and we've been saying for some time now that there's been this big paradigm shift, or there needs to be a bit more of a paradigm shift around what traditionally works in real estate, property growth and property investment. And historically, people have always said if you want capital growth, you must buy houses because it's the land component goes up and everything on top of that land depreciates. Now, whilst that's true, when you do buy a house or an apartment or anything, the property starts going backwards in value because it is depreciating as it's getting older.
What does just expand on that for those that maybe don't understand depreciation?
Okay, so it's like if you think about it in the way of a car dealership, you go in and you buy a brand new car, you spend $100,000, you drive it off the lot, it's instantly worth probably 70,000, right? That's because it's no longer new and it's depreciating. When you're an investor, you can actually write off that loss against your taxes. Okay. Now, when you buy a block of land and you build a home, think about a brand new home, and it's going to be the best it's ever been on day one. Every day after that, you might have some subsidence, you might see some cracks, you might see tenant damage. It's just going to get wear and tear. So because of that, it's depreciating. As an owner-occupier, that's useless. But as a property investor, again, that depreciation I can write off against my tax as a loss, an on-paper loss. So when we go back to
apartment house, townhouse.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry, what was that?
The apartment house,
the
townhouse.
apartment house. So now circling back to when we talk about houses versus apartments, traditionally houses have outperformed units. Okay, but what we've seen in some of the most recent data, and we've been probably reporting on this for 2 years, but in the most recent data by CoreLogic, which is now known as Cotality, in 62% of suburbs around Australia, units are outperforming houses on capital growth. Okay. Now, when people think of units, instantly we start to think of high-rise. Okay, and it's not necessarily units. Can be a townhouse. Units can be two side-by-side duplex. They don't have to be high-rise. But in markets all over the country now, units are outperforming houses, not only on capital growth, but also getting better rental yields and better rental growth. There's a number of reasons for this, and it's quite fascinating. And I can tell you this even from my own personal journey. Growing up in country Victoria, and my dad's farm's on 170 acres or something like that. So to go and live in a one-bedroom apartment just sounds completely unfathomable. Yep. But that's what I did. I went and moved, when I moved to Melbourne for my job, I hated it to begin with. I was like, this is, you can't swing a cat in here. But all of a sudden, the lifestyle part kicks in and you go, I've got a gym in the building, I've got 24-hour concierge, there's a cinema, there's a pool. I mean, it's a dream. And even better, I don't have to pay for those body corporates because I'm a tenant. So there's that aspect where people are choosing to go and live there. And there's so many cohorts of people that are choosing to live this way now. So there's lifestyle. I live in quite a nice area in Melbourne, but yet we've got the highest it's the second highest crime rates in the state.
Jeez.
Right? Because people often think about that lower socioeconomic part of every city and say, I would never live there. But in fact, the crime rates, it's actually higher in some of those more affluent areas. And the reason I say why this is relevant is in the apartment space, all the downsizers and the right sizes, half of them are doing this for security alone. And having just flown up from Melbourne, I can tell you, even overnight, the break-ins that have been happening left, right, and centre. I understand where I live in a 4-bedroom house in Malvern at the moment. We've had 3 attempted break-ins there alone in the last 18 months.
Is it that bad?
That's how bad it is.
Yeah, wow.
So there's people choosing to live in these lock up and leave lifestyle apartments purely for that security, the community. If you think about the immigration as well, so many people that are actually moving to Australia, they land in the capital cities to begin with. A lot of those people are probably moving from cities overseas where they don't have house and land packages. They're living in high-rise buildings, so that's the norm. So you can see there's this trend that's happening now where people are actually choosing, and obviously we've got the flexibility to work from home. We probably don't have to commute as much for work as we used to. So it's changing. And as I said, the only inevitable thing in real estate is change itself.
Yeah, that's true. If we take 3 brackets, I've got serviceability up to and a deposit up to $1 million, up to $2 million, up to $6 million. Where would you be telling me to invest those three different categories?
We get those questions a lot, and we probably I'd need to know more about the person's situation to begin with. But off the top, I would typically say if you had a budget of $1 million, $2 million, or $3 million, I'm going to tell you the same thing most of the time, and that is we don't need to spend 1, 2, or 3 on one property. We would break that budget up, and I would diversify it across multiple states. Think about your superannuation. We don't just go and put it all in Tesla shares. We go and spread it so that we get some safety across lots of different industries. I would do that the same thing with your property portfolio. So we'd look at based on where the markets are, what's rising markets. We diversify so we don't get land tax issues and things like that. And then even structure, we might even think about putting them in different trusts and all sorts of stuff.
What's a trust for someone that doesn't know?
For trusts are like a family trust and things like that. There's benefits and considerations. One of the big things with a family trust is you can disperse incomes, meaning, and one of the biggest reasons for having a family trust as a business owner is actually for asset protection in case you were sued and things like that. But also the challenge is once you start to put properties into your family trust, you might lose the negative gearing benefits, which is things like the depreciation we talked about before. So.
You said Darwin's a hotspot?
Darwin's a hotspot.
Give me another 2.
It won't last all that long then.
Okay.
The other one, I would say, and the reason for that, just for context, is it's not a big market.
No.
But it's just rising so quickly. We, in my time of sort of analysing real estate markets, I've never seen anything quite as quick as the way that Darwin's moving right now.
Is that right?
It's frantic.
And what segment of the market? The higher end, the middle? The lower?
Properties between 300 to 800.
Wow. Why do you think they're moving so fast there?
I think for a lot of investors that were in Perth recently, like in the last few years, they've got used to quite a good rental yield and that capital growth. Darwin's the next one for that at the moment. And then the other one where people are piling into at the moment for investment is actually Melbourne. Yeah. And my opinion on that's probably a little bit different to a lot of other buyers agents or real estate professionals around Australia. And that is that people are buying in Melbourne because it seems affordable. It's hard to believe, as the largest capital city in Australia, that we're actually cheaper by median price, not only on Sydney, but on Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth.
Yeah, I was going to say it's lower than Brisbane, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Brisbane, Adelaide, Perth and Sydney. Yeah, so all of them.
Wow.
Now, so instantly people go, well, it can't, and like, don't get me wrong, you're never going to buy in Melbourne cheaper than you will today. In the future, it will not happen, okay? I know that will be a very strong market over the next 10 years, and I think most investors do. But where I think people are falling short in their consideration on Melbourne is what is it going to cost to hold that property in Melbourne? So as I mentioned before, the reason I bought in Albury instead of Wodonga, land tax, compliance, higher stamp duty, and all those factors, when you start to take into consideration, and we did an analysis, I sit on the National Board for the Property Investors Council of Australia, and we're doing a white paper with the REIV at the moment, and one of the things we're talking about is if you were to buy a median priced house in Sydney, which is about 1.3 million, and you got the median priced rent on that, which is probably at about $750, $850 a week. So obviously high price, lower rent. When I go to Melbourne and I do the same thing, and you buy a house at $980,000, you might be getting $650 per week. When I take into account the stamp duty and the holding costs, I would lose $25,000 on an 80% loan, 80% LVR. So that means I'll put down a 20% deposit, I pay my stamp duty, and then the holding costs for that year, I would lose $25,000 in Victoria, and I would only lose $15,000 doing the exact same exercise in New South Wales. So what's the lesson in that? When you're looking at markets, you can't just look at what's it going to look like in the future in terms of growth, because if you can't hold that property because it's pulling money out of your pocket every single week, then who cares how much it's going to grow, because you might not be able to hold it. And I think that's where a lot of people are missing the full analysis on Melbourne.
I think that's a good point, is just sort of understanding the whole picture and all the costs associated to the investment, rather than just, I think it's going to go up X% and that sounds good, let's go for it kind of thing.
That's it.
Yep.
Now you wanted a couple more markets?
I did.
So we would say the most exciting market for both short and long-term growth at the moment in Australia would be the Sunshine Coast in Queensland.
Don't tell me that.
Yeah.
I'm flying there on Friday.
Hey, there you go. Whereabouts are you staying? Maroochydore or?
No, Noosa area.
Noosa, oh, beautiful. Yeah, well, Noosa, obviously very expensive, the top end of the market. coming back down. So we started buying in the Maroochydore and surrounds back in 2018.
Yeah. So you guys got the good growth.
This is, I mentioned before though, markets are cyclical. Okay, so you go through a wind phase where it goes, okay, we've got rising sales activity, we start to see capital growth. Then we start to see the sales activity start to slow down because it's reached a peak and people can't afford it. Maybe it's interest rates, whatever it may be. It starts to plateau. And again, if it's a sustainable market, meaning strong local economy, the market won't dip. It won't go, hey, we're going to fall off a cliff like Melbourne did. It's Perth and places like that at the moment, whilst we think it's hit the peak of the market, we still think that it's going to sort of just stabilise. So we don't see that price growth continuing at the rate that it has, but it'll soften for a bit and then eventually it gets its second wind and goes off. Sunshine Coast is in that second wind phase right now. So 2017, they announced they were decommissioning the 53-hectare golf course on the Maroochydore River. It was a publicly owned golf course. Cleared that. Let's build a brand new CBD. Fastest internet cable in Australia coming in. Completely green energy city. Whole thing's run by solar. In fact, if you go and put rubbish in a garbage bin out the front on the street in the Sunshine Coast, it goes underground and it's sucked out to a recycling plant. Like it's a remarkable feat what they're trying to do there. But because of this brand new CBD, you've got multinational businesses like UE Insurance and that setting up their national headquarters up on the Sunshine Coast. It's half the price of Sydney. Lots of lifestyle appeal. Obviously in COVID people were rushing up there to live, but even before that people were choosing to move up there because of its affordability in comparison to the other capital cities, but also the amount of job creation going on. So it is a really exciting market. You've got things like 6-star hotels popping up. The airport there is now international. You won't know that when you go through there. It's pretty small still, but it is an international airport. And through my travels overseas working in real estate and many actually, this is a really good point, actually. So 2016, I moved to Miami in the US, working for a IT startup, like a prop tech startup. And I was helping sort of open up offices all over the world. And we were sort of setting up their sales teams and things like that. And, we were more or less moving around from all these different buyer markets. So China's a buyer market. They will buy into, the US, the UK, a lot of Europe, and certainly Australia back then. That's cooled off a little bit now. And then we go into Latin America and places like that where they love buying into the US. And then there was Dubai and all sorts of places. But anyway, the reason I bring this up is when I was in Miami, we would go across to China for a week at a time. We'd take delegates across there to meet the agents that we had in China who had investors willing to invest into the US. And interestingly, the Chinese are very aspirational and they love to buy quality real estate, but what they don't like is having to do too many connecting flights. So as simple as not having direct flights from China to Miami, they would not buy there. Now, why am I telling you that story now? If we think about Sunshine Coast, now that's got direct flights from Asia, that's not a coincidence that we're starting to see Asian money going into the Sunshine Coast, which never existed prior to it. So Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, you look at all of those major capitals, even Perth, a lot of Asian money went into those markets, direct flights.
Interesting. You wouldn't think that. No. You really have to understand the data and have access to that, I suppose. And so,
well, sometimes it's not data; it's actually anecdotal stuff. You say, when you're actually there talking to agents, and my Mandarin's pretty average, but you'd say to one of the agents, "So why didn't they buy? What is it they don't like?" And they said, "No direct flights." If they're going to buy a luxury, penthouse in they might spend 5-10 mil. They want to be able to visit it, and they don't want to have to go via Dallas or San Fran to get there.
Tim, I'm going to throw you a curveball.
Yep.
I often hear people say to me, I feel like the property market's a big bubble. I feel like that comes up every few years and it's a big thing. What's your 2 cents?
Look, a lot of this talk, and a lot of the time you see this in the headlines, and media loves to tell a sad story because it gets the clicks. But a lot of the people that are writing these articles, and even in some of the people that are writing these articles or are getting quoted in these articles, work for the big 4 or big 5 banks. And if there's one thing I can promise you is they always get it wrong. And when I say they always get it wrong, they always get it wrong. Like go back to COVID, COVID hit, we're going to see 20% drops in the property market. over the next 2 years, we did the opposite of that.
Yeah,
so
exploded.
they weren't 20% wrong, they were 40% wrong. And then the same thing happened as soon as we started to see interest rates escalate. They said, we're going to see the property market crash. Now they're talking about it because of the tariffs or because of Ukraine or whatever it may be. There's always the doom and gloom that it's going to affect the property market. Why do you think the markets haven't dropped during that time? With rising interest rates, surely it's got to put a slowdown on the real estate markets. In fact, I'll tell you the actual reason for that in a minute, but I was going to say last year, even when the newspapers would come out and say, this is what the Australian property market did.
Yeah.
And there is no such thing as the Australian property market because there's thousands of property markets within Australia.
Yeah.
But what they'll do is they'll group them all together and say the national market grew by 5%. At the end of last year, we did our own analysis and we said, if you were to take there's 30,000 markets in Australia, so 15,000 suburbs, you've got house market, unit market. If we go and look at those markets and then we say, look, get rid of every suburb that actually hasn't had more than, say, 50 sales in the last 12 months. And what that does is it gets rid of all those tiny little towns and it shows you the areas of substance. What you get left with was about 4,500 suburbs or markets. Of those 4,500 markets, there was at least 500 of them that had 10% growth and about 150 of them that had over 20% growth. But the media will actually publish the 5% figure.
Yeah.
So why that's interesting is because if you just rely on that media rhetoric, you're going to buy into it and go, oh, geez, if Trump puts those tariffs in, I'm going to buy, and then all of a sudden my property's going to go backwards. It won't happen, and I'll tell you the reason why. We don't all need Tesla shares, but we all need a roof above our head.
Yeah.
The reason prices continue to grow is because our population has grown by about 4 million people in the last 10 years, and we have less houses for sale and less houses for rent today than we did 10 years ago.
What do you think?
It's a simple supply and demand.
Yeah, no, I like that. What do you think will happen with AI? How do you think that will impact the movement of people and where they live?
This is a really interesting one because we actually won the Australian AI Award last year for the property investment industry, which is quite cool. And ironically, at the same time, I've done a lot of media on this exact topic, and I'm actually taking the opposite angle than what people would expect, and that is that people should be fearful of AI in the property space because you can put way too much trust in it, and AI isn't going to do from A to Z. What it does and what it does for our business is it gets rid of the noise.
Yeah.
So we have a proprietary formula we call the Price Predictor Index, where we go through every single quarter and analyse every single suburb and market in Australia, and we give it a classification on the property clock: rising, declining, plateau, whatever it may be. That used to take us 9 weeks to produce every quarter, right? So by the time you finish one, you're almost starting it again.
Yeah.
Right? Through the help of AI, we can now produce that in about 2 hours.
Yeah,
right?
wow. Okay.
Now, that is done all the analysis to get rid of all the noise that we don't need, and then we go through with a human eye, and we actually go through and test the AI, and we do things like back testing with machine learning and all sorts of things like that. But what AI has done is it's created efficiency. In the property investment space, that's the way that it should be looked at, in my opinion. The reason being is because the way that AI models work is, and it's interesting, only ChatGPT 5, when it was that model was just released, it actually took a step backwards in terms of performance, which I think is a great thing. So what I mean by that is ChatGPT 4 and every model before it went, sorry, you asked me a question, bang, here's the answer. And it do it as quickly as possible, and that's the way it was measured. ChatGPT 5 will go, let me think about that for a second. Then it comes back with an answer because we'd rather that answer to be more accurate. Now, ironically, we do strategy sessions with customers at Hotspotting where they can book a time to have a chat with us and analyse their portfolio, give them some recommendations on areas for their next ones and things like that. And I had a customer who I helped about 12 months ago who was ready to come back in the market, and he sends me an email. He says, hey, Tim, I can spend about $4 million. And I asked ChatGPT, how would I spend that money if I was Tim at Hotspotting?
Yeah.
And what locations would they buy? And what was really cool is he sent me ChatGPT's response, and my response back to him, I said, thank God I've still got a job.
Yeah.
Because it was an awful response. And I said, I would never take that advice.
Yeah.
So that's probably a lesson in itself, that don't put too much reliance on ChatGPT or AI and things, because it's garbage in, garbage out. Right now, if you were to go to ChatGPT, it's going to get all of this information from the internet, and you don't really know where it's at unless you start really drilling into sources, right?
Sure, yeah.
So people take it as gospel straight away. With the way that we use AI, outside of our formulas, we also have we call it a Hotspotting Holly. And Hotspotting Holly is a GPT. Okay, so she is a large language model. She basically has been trained. We've got a property course. She's been trained in our property course. We have 120 different local government areas that we produce reports for. You know, every day we're producing new ones. They're getting updated. Every time they're updated, she's trained on that. So when you ask Holly a question, you know, what's the vacancy rate of Springfield Lakes, she spits it straight back out instantly, but it's trusted source because it's actually come directly from our data warehouse.
Yep.
And if you were to say, well, tell me, why should I buy in Springfield Lakes? And I'll say, because it's going to be double the size of Silicon Valley in the next 20 years. She'll be able to give you all of that context, but she can't go and search the internet for it. She can only do it through the information we provide.
Yeah, I think having the right context makes a huge difference.
The main thing, I think, when people think about property investment, a lot of the time they're sort of they're geared towards a number. They say, I want to own 10 investment properties in the next 10 years. And I think that mentality's got to change. Quite often when people say, that's what I want to achieve, I say, do they have to be 10 good ones? Or are you happy with 10 shit properties? Because I would rather have 5 really good performing properties than 10. 10 properties is 10 tenants, 10 headaches, 10 lots of tax returns for each property, you know, one for each property.
Yeah.
It's a lot. So I think the mentality's got to change around that. And it's all great to have aspirations and you want to be very successful and you want to grow a portfolio, but don't think about it so much as how many properties. Think about how good those properties are and what they can do to grow your wealth.
Tim, thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.